Good morning, and thank all of you for being here. It is my honor, with so many of his dearest friends, to preside over this memorial service for Mr. Bill Gatton. We are in a place he loved and an institution he believed in so deeply. It is fitting to be in this space to honor someone who did so much to make so many wonderful days at the University of Kentucky. And I am so pleased that we could share our community's love and affection for Mr. Gatton with his wife, Lee. Thank you for being here, Lee. I know how much this institution meant to Mr. Gatton. I know all you meant even more to him. I have so many memories and moments with Bill Gatton, but my mind often goes to one of them. It was a grand day on this campus. The weather was picture perfect. Balloons fell from the ceiling. Music was in the air. Community members enjoyed cakes, gifts, and prizes. Students, and really all of us, were excited about the beginning of the school year. We were all together to dedicate the new UK Student Center, the Bill Gatton Student Center, a facility that symbolizes and represents so much of who we are as a university and what we aspire to be. As we ended the ceremony, the Acousticats, our a cappella group, sang My Old Kentucky Home. You know how it goes. People stood and swayed with the music. And Mr. Gatton had risen to stand along with everyone else. But he alone, as I recall, and it's now a cherished picture for me, stood with his hand on his heart. Such was his reverence for the Commonwealth and this place. It reminded me then, and it reminds me now. Kentucky was always in Bill Gatton's mind because Kentucky was always in Bill Gatton's heart. And it was that heart, big and strong, determined and resolute, compassionate and open, that pushed him and pushed us to be more. He was always open to what he could be and what everyone else could be, if given the chance. It's why he gave to causes here that were so often focused on students, whether a facility or a scholarship, or a quiet gift to a student who would never know their benefactor, only that someone had reached out when they needed it most. It's an incredible loss we mourn today. But what an incredible legacy we have been gifted. This morning we will hear in person and by video from just a fraction, a small number of the voices and people touched and impacted by Mr. Bill Gatton. Whether they knew him well or not at all, as you will see this morning, they have been inspired by his example, touched by his generosity, emboldened by his legacy and sense of purpose. His legacy reminds all of those who call this community home, the University of, for, and with Kentucky, that we are called to serve the state whose name we bear and whose promise we are responsible for fulfilling. We were created to advance Kentucky. Bill Gatton saw that clearly. He felt it deeply. And his legacy is a challenge to all of us, particularly those who call this community home, to continue caring as he cared. Fundamentally, Mr. Gatton understood that we are here to teach and reach, heal and hope in every corner and every community of Kentucky, from big cities to small coal-filled towns like the one that raised the man we honor and remember today. Bill Gatton always pushed us to remember that commitment, because he knew from his own life how important an education was and how vital this institution is for Kentucky. Today, we will remember a life so large and a reach and impact that extended so far. And in doing so, we will renew our commitment to honoring his legacy of giving and service, and having an open heart to all that is possible when our willingness to give and serve goes beyond self, beyond those we know, to a state he loved and that always held his heart. Thank you for being here, and those who are joining us via video and streaming as well. Danny Dunn was one of Mr. Gatton's closest confidants and advisors. I would like to invite him to say a few words.
Thank you, President Capilouto. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. The first thing I want to say is I appreciate each of you here. You have always treated me with great respect and kindness, and you've always made me feel like a part of your Kentucky family, even though I'm a Tennessee boy. So I thank you, and I mean that sincerely. I love Mr. Gatton. I have a great love for him and his family. I began working for him 34 years ago. It's been a tremendous pleasure to work for him. Lee and Chase and Mr. Gatton, though I worked for them as an employee, I've become, and they became dear friends to me. I feel very inadequate today to stand here and say some things that would honor Mr. Gatton, but I am happy to be here. I've had this thought in my mind ever since Mr. Gatton passed, and I expressed this at his funeral. And that is, why have I, Danny Dunn, been so privileged to spend 34 years with Bill Gatton, as close as I was able to spend with him at that time. We did so much together. I'm not quite sure yet why I had that privilege, but I'm grateful that I did. I want to personalize Mr. Gatton just for a minute. I hope you understand my thoughts here. I'll always like to hear a little bit something that's personal about the man or the woman that you're talking about. I'm going to talk about food. I traveled with Mr. Gatton many times. We ate out at many restaurants. Mr. Gatton enjoyed country cooking. He enjoyed vegetables. I know Lee would confirm that. He loved strawberries. He loved watermelons, most any melon. He loved good peaches. They had to be good peaches, but he loved really good peaches. He loved good whitefish, and though we have good whitefish over in Bristol, Tennessee, no one has good whitefish like Malone's, and you all probably understand that. He loved chocolate candy. He loved chocolate-covered nuts. He loved chocolate pie. He loved most all sweets. I do not believe I need to say anything to you about how much he loved Kentucky basketball. But there were other activities he also enjoyed. He particularly enjoyed golf. He was an avid bird hunter before I came with him. I don't know that he ever went bird hunting after I came to work for him. But he did a lot of bird hunting in Mississippi, in the Midwest, the Northwest, and he loved the bird hunt. He also enjoyed playing card games, and that was a treat for him when he had an opportunity to do that. In all of those activities, he was extremely competitive. He wanted to win, always. Now let me talk a little bit about Mr. Gatton, the man, with some stories that mean a lot to me. I hope they will to you. I think Mr. Gatton was a very gracious man. He treated people the same. I noticed that wherever we traveled, and especially at work, it did not matter if it was a technician or the general manager, the custodian, an office clerk, or whomever. He treated them all the same. A pilot named Tom Hagee, who worked for us, told me an experience he had with Mr. Gatton on a trip they made to Mayo Clinic. I was not with them. They arrived late in the afternoon. A little while later, Tom received a call from Mr. Gatton. And he told Tom, he said, listen, it's almost dinner time. Would you like to go to dinner with me? And Tom was happy to go to dinner with him, but he was a little taken back. The people Tom had worked for during his career were much like Mr. Gatton in that they were highly successful people who could afford a private jet. But never in Tom's career had he ever had the owner of that plane invite him to go to dinner with him. And it was just the two of them. That meant so much to Tom Hagee. He's told me that story time and time and time again. Mr. Gatton was a good employer. In the car business, there's quite often a lot of turnover, but we did not have that problem in Mr. Gatton's dealerships. Before selling the dealerships, he had many people who had worked with him from 25 to 45 years. When people wanted to work for Bill Gatton at his dealerships. Mr. Gatton was a considerate and thoughtful man. I want to share two basketball trip experiences I had with him that I hope illustrate this. I am a Kentucky fan unless they're playing Tennessee. We were at a game at Rupp Arena, and they were playing Tennessee. Kentucky was. The game had started, and it was close and competitive and exciting. I wasn't showing any emotion either way for Kentucky or for Tennessee. Mr. Gatton noticed that, and I'll never forget this. He turned to me and he said, Danny, it's all right if you support Tennessee, if you cheer for Tennessee. And, he set me at ease. It's just a kind thought, a considerate thought, because who was I sitting around? People like President Capilouto, the governor, Mike Ritchie, Dr. Brotman, Mr. Gatton. So, but I appreciate that thought. The other experience has to do with a regional game in Birmingham, Alabama in 1985. I was with Mr. Gatton along with a fellow named John King. My brother-in-law lived in Birmingham, and Mr. Gatton had 4 tickets. He gave 2 to me for myself and my brother-in-law, and he and John had 2. When my brother-in-law and I arrived at the game on Thursday night, we went to our seats, and they were really good seats. I was concerned at that moment because I knew that 2 of the tickets were really good seats, and 2 of the tickets were not so good seats. I was sure I had the tickets for the 2 really good seats. Now, I think most of you can appreciate how much Mr. Gatton loved good tickets, good seats, especially at Kentucky basketball games. I tried to find him and John. I couldn't find them anywhere. The next morning, my thoughts were confirmed. I talked to him about the tickets, and sure enough, I had the good seats. I begged him to take back those 2 tickets and swap with me, and he wouldn't. He wasn't going to do it. But the university bailed me out. They found him 2 good seats that were better than mine. But again, his consideration to me, he wasn't going to take back those tickets. I've never forgotten that. Mr. Gatton believed in being honest. His father, he talked so much about his father. And about his father's honesty and hard work. He learned a lot from his dad. Lee received a note from an acquaintance of Mr. Gatton's after Mr. Gatton died, who's from Bristol. And I want to quote part of what he said to her. And I quote, "No businessman I ever knew was more dead straight to the core honest. It was of utmost importance to Bill to maintain a sense of integrity in all that he did. And he expected his employees to do the same. What a great example and role model he provided to an industry that is often portrayed, whether fairly so or not, in public perception as sometimes playing tag with the truth." End quote. Mr. Gatton was honest. That meant so much to him. When he bought the dealership in Bristol, Tennessee in 1967, the first thing he did was meet with all the salespeople. The previous management of the dealership before he bought it, they were rolling back the odometers on cars. Mr. Gatton found that out. He told them in that meeting that if he catches anyone rolling back the odometer, he'll fire them. And the person that told them to roll it back, he'll fire them. I have heard him say that he did not give that directive because he was such a great person, but it was just the right thing to do. Well, Mr. Gatton was a great person, and it was the right thing to do. A few thoughts that were expressed to me by people after Mr. Gatton passed away are important. I think you will appreciate them. Kelly King, who some of you know is the former CEO of Truist Bank, said, "I learned something from Mr. Gatton every time I was with him. I learned early in our relationship that when Bill Gatton speaks, you better listen." A lot of people who called and sent emails always referred to him as their friend. He was a friend. One person said, "None of us would be where we are today without him." An investment wealth manager said, and Barbara, you'll appreciate what I'm getting ready to say because you and I had this same conversation, "I felt a special connection with him that extended beyond the traditional client relationship." It's exactly what Barbara said to me, Barbara Edelman. Mr. Gatton had a great compassion. He tried to help when he could, and he did help an awful lot. He helped save the Sacramento school in Sacramento, Kentucky, from being torn down and the children being moved to another area. He didn't want them to be bused outside of their community. Mr. Gatton loved his home state of Kentucky and the University of Kentucky. In his obituary, it was noted, and Frank Winston, who some of you know, penned this thought, and it is absolutely the truth, that once he moved to Upper East Tennessee, he lived there for 55 years, but his heart never left Kentucky. This is true. I traveled with Mr. Gatton to Lexington many, many, many times. He had a private airplane. We could have flown up here every time. But he was just as happy to get in that car and drive 4 hours, let me drive, and come up here and to the Kentucky events, whether they be the school or whatever. Almost without exception on those trips, as we drove through Cumberland Gap and crossed into Kentucky, he would call Lee, or he might call Frank Winston, he might call Mike, and he would tell them, the sunshine just got a little brighter, the grass a little greener, and the flowers much more beautiful. I truly was and am touched by his deep, deep love for this state and for the university. Let me refer back in closing to his love for basketball, Kentucky basketball. He often would tell people that if, as a young man, he could have chosen to become an All-American basketball player at the University of Kentucky, or become someone as wealthy as Warren Buffett, that he would have chosen to be the All-American basketball player. That's how much he loved that Kentucky basketball. Look, he was being totally honest. I've heard him say that so many times. Today, I think it's important for this group in particular to know of something else that I have heard him say a number of times. And I quote, "I want John Calipari and the basketball team to win the NCAA tournament every year. But what is more important to me is that the University of Kentucky become the leading academic institution in the Southeastern Conference and of all America." That was his dream. That was his vision. I think most of you, if not all of you, have some idea of how hard he worked to make that happen. he did all he could. Let me just say he did all he could to make that happen. I hesitate to make this statement, but I will, because I think the spirit of Mr. Gatton has pushed me to do so. I think he would have me give us a challenge today, especially this group, to do what he did, and that's to do all within your power to make the University of Kentucky the leading institution in the country. Thank you so much.
Danny, thank you very much for your heartfelt thought and your charge to us on behalf of Mr. Gatton. So now we have a video message from 3 people who admired Mr. Gatton a great deal.
Hello, my name is Tom Lewis, and I'm a 1971 graduate of the University of Kentucky and a longtime supporter. It's my pleasure to talk with you today about my friend Bill Gatton. When I first met Bill back in 2015, it was easy to see that this was a unique man. Some of the things that made Bill so special were that, first of all, he loved Kentucky. He loved the University of Kentucky, but mostly he loved Kentuckians. One day I gave him a call and asked him if he would support a nonprofit in Kentucky that I supported, and he told me he would think about it. After a few weeks, he got back to me. He had done his homework, and he made a nice gift. Bill Gatton was tough, but he liked to say yes. Because Bill had become such a successful businessman, he made it possible for thousands upon thousands of future Kentuckians to do the same. The Gatton School of Business is just one of his legacies. But Bill was much more than just generous. He was generous with his wealth. He was generous with his wisdom. He was generous with his work. And he was generous with his witness. Bill Gatton was a Kentucky original, and his name is synonymous with integrity and generosity. God bless Bill Gatton. Thank you.
It's an honor to be part of this memorial service for Bill Gatton. Bill and I shared common roots. Both of us grew up in Remembrance County and graduated from UK. Both of us worked in the auto industry. Bill on the retail side, I was on the factory side at Chevrolet Motor Division. Bill was a lifelong friend and mentor of my career at General Motors. He was incredibly smart and a successful businessman. My dad always said Bill was the best salesman that he ever met. Whether selling watermelons or magazine subscriptions, it was almost impossible to say no to Bill Gatton. Bill often cited a poem called The Bridge Builder, with its clear message about caring for others. And like the old man in the poem, Bill was the ultimate bridge builder, building countless bridges for future students that will come to UK to achieve their dreams for better tomorrows. While working in Chevrolet's central office, I had the opportunity to see Bill at various dealer events. Once I remember sharing with him my frustration over not getting a certain position that was available. Bill said with his very positive words of encouragement, "Be patient. GM management has big opportunities ahead for you." And in just a few months, those opportunities opened up with 2 major promotions. I will always cherish those special times when he shared his wisdom with me. So as we gather today to remember Bill, we will miss his wonderful smile and always positive attitude. And with much admiration for our treasured memories, we salute his remarkable accomplishments, his enduring legacy, and his total devotion to others, and celebrate a life well lived. Well done, Bill Gatton. Well done, my friend.
Mr. Bill Gatton, an unbelievable fan of our great university, unbelievable supporter of all of us that work here. I can remember meeting him for the first time. I'm on the job a week, and he starts talking about who we are recruiting. A couple names I didn't recognize. And then I go back to the office, they said, "Yeah, we've sent them stuff, and we're talking to them." He knew more about our recruiting than I knew about our recruiting. Anytime I went to Oak Hill, he would leave a car for me. I don't know how he got it there. I don't know how far it was away, But when I went to Oak Hill Academy, that car was waiting on me. A big day for us is when we gave him a Kentucky jersey with number 1 and his name on the back, and we took a group picture. I know he loved it. And let me say one thing. I remember hearing him speak when we dedicated the student union that he built for everybody. And he said, I'm that turtle on the post. And you look at him and you say, how in the world did he get up there? Because he couldn't do it himself. Well, Mr. Gatton put a lot of us turtles on posts. He did it. And I know I'm one of them. So again, God bless Bill Gatton. Rest in peace. Thank you.
Mike Ritchie served the University of Kentucky for nearly 50 years. And so during almost all of that time, he worked closely with Mr. Gatton. Mike, we look forward to hearing your reflections about Mr. Gatton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to turn my telephone off because if it rings, I'm afraid it's going to be Bill Gatton. Probably every day over the last 3 or 4 years, I received a phone call when he had his health, just checking in on the university, what was going on, asking questions about the future and so forth. And he became a very, very close and dear friend to me. And like many others in this room, I miss him. I have to clarify something that Danny said. He was an avid UK sports fan, especially basketball. Danny is from the University of Tennessee, and so was his senior attorney who worked with him for 55 years, Frank Winston. And 3 years ago, an unheard of thing took place in basketball. Tennessee beat us twice in the regular season. And I came into my office one Friday afternoon, and my administrative assistant, Jennifer, was beside herself, scared to death, because someone had sent me a black wreath with black ribbons and black flowers and so forth. And she had already called the state police. She had already called the FBI. She thought I was on somebody's hit list, which maybe I have been in the past for various reasons. But I looked at it, and there was no note. And so I picked up the telephone, and I called Mr. Gatton, and I said, did you send me something here this afternoon from a florist out on Southland? And Southland would not tell us drive who was doing it. And they said, we can't do that. Well, Mr. Gatton said, I have no clue what you're talking about. Well, then the story came out. It was sent from there. I accused Danny and also Mr. Winston, but I think Mr. Gatton was behind it. Go forward 3 weeks, Mitch. We were playing in the SEC tournament, and we beat Tennessee. I sent a wreath back to Bristol, Tennessee. In the fall, they upset us in football. The wreath came back to me. When I retired in January, I left it in the office for Tom, and I don't know what's happened to it since that time. But Mr. Gatton took that very, very seriously. I had the opportunity to work at Ground Zero with Mr. Gatton, especially for the last 15 or 20 years, primarily in the area of philanthropy. But I do want you to know that his interest in this university, this state, far exceeded what his contributions were or the influence he had with other people. Frequently, he would call and he would give me the name of a student in Michigan or Kentucky or Tennessee who needed to have some follow-up, who needed to have a tour of campus at the University of Kentucky, and even said, I will help them financially if they decide to come to the University of Kentucky. He wanted students to come to the University of Kentucky. There were times that he would call me about a medical matter for a friend of his. Mike, can you see into this? Mr. Gatton was concerned about the people that were around him, not only those that worked for him, but those that worked with him and those that he influenced in many ways. Mr. Gatton has a legacy of philanthropy, and it's not only at the University of Kentucky. We have with us today Sheldon McKinney in the back row, and Sheldon is the executive director of the Kentucky FFA Foundation. Mr. Gatton is a product of that organization. He was state FFA president, can you believe that, about 70 years ago, and recently made a very significant gift to that organization to assist young people in leadership development, problem solving, collaboration, team building, and he was very proud of that organization. And so he made that contribution. It's already been referenced about the Sacramento School, and Robin Webb, state senator from up in Grayson, Kentucky, I thought she was going to be here, was very influential in helping Mr. Gatton get that school named. But he has big tracts to fulfill, but he also did other things. Last week I had the opportunity to travel to Muhlenberg County, which happens to be my home county, to see my 94-year-old dad. And afterward I drove out to the Bremen community, and I went there particularly to visit Mr. Gatton's gravesite. It's a mausoleum, and very prominent on the outside are the words of the poem on Bridge Builder. And afterward I went by the Bethlehem Church, the place where he was baptized as a young boy. The church was completely destroyed in December with the tornadoes that went through there, along with the church parsonage, along with the church fellowship hall. And Mr. Gatton, maybe his last gift, Danny, one of the last gifts he made was to make a significant contribution to help with that rebuild. He was interested in the people. And I believe it was Dr. McVeigh, Mr. President, who once said, the university is a place, it is a spirit. And I believe the place and the spirit of Bremen and of Muhlenberg County never left Mr. Gatton. He influenced his sister-in-law before her passing about 4 years ago to leave her estate to cancer research and to provide scholarships for students from McLean County, Kentucky. He was a roaring advocate of the University of Kentucky. If he had just been president of our alumni association, we'd be the best in the world because of his drive and his determination and his commitment. But he was a bridge builder. And a bridge builder gifts that he made a pathway forward for good, for progress, to help others. And he took that very, very seriously. He was not easy to work with. He had the final say. In fact, many times he would say, Mike, I have a way you can win and I can win, but I don't think I ever won. I don't know how that ever happened. But he also was very much reflective in how he made gifts, and he wanted to make sure it was the right gift for the right reason at the right time to make an impact on other people. Let me share just briefly about his philanthropy legacy at this university. It started back in the early 90s in athletics. He and C.M. Newton had been in school together. C.M. was the athletic director at that time, and Mr. Gatton's first significant gift was a gift to fund the academic advising system in Memorial Coliseum. That's what engaged him. C.M. Newton, according to the rumor, Frank and Simon, according to that, it was C.M. Newton who came to Dick first and said, you need to talk to Bill Gatton about naming your School of Business. He said to Mr. Gatton, you need to name the School of Business. And as a result of that, in 1995 and other connections, this wonderful college was named for Mr. Gatton, and it bears his name, the building bears his name. He was also hopeful, and it was kind of promised to him that in the early 2000s, he was going to have a new College of Business built over next to Memorial Coliseum. But because of 9/11, Enron, several other things that took place, the economic downturn, that didn't happen. President Capilouto came on the scene. We went to see Bill Gatton, and we said, we're not going to probably get the state money for this, but we believe after doing some predictive modeling that we can build this primarily from private funds, but you've got to help us. And Mr. Gatton was somewhat agreeable to do that. He still wanted the state to have some leverage in that, some skin in the game, as he would say it. But we embarked upon that task, involved David Blackwood as our dean, worked with a lot of key people, including Terry Woodard, many in this room. And as a result, this wonderful facility was built after Dr. Capilouto came to the university. I'll also remember, and I shared this with Kathy Jacobs when she came in, we were breaking ground for this building about 2012. And Mr. Gatton was standing next to Don Jacobs, and he said, Don, you and Kathy need to have a building named for you on our campus. And Don said, oh no, I'm not a UK grad. He said, but you've made your livelihood in this community. People respect you. You've been involved with the Hope Center. You need to do that. And when they made that commitment to build our science building on campus, I believe Mr. Gatton was more proud of that, and also of Tom Lewis's gift, than even any gift he ever made himself, and so forth. And he called and he talked to me about that. and we're very, very proud of that type of influence. And then he was here when we broke ground for the Lewis Honors College. Again, very, very proud of what he had done. In 2014, in February, the President and I had an opportunity to meet with him, asking him for a lead gift to construct the Student Center and to really make and diminish the cost to students, the student fee. And Mr. Gatton graciously agreed to that, and we are so proud of that facility, but it was too small a year after we opened it up. And we went back to Mr. Gatton and said, Mr. Gatton, we've got a great opportunity for you. And again, he stepped forward. But I want to share something about that. We came to the end of the construction, and Eric Mundy mentioned to me that the cost of that addition had come in under the amount that was to be, and quite a bit more. And so we called Mr. Gatton, and we said, you do not owe that last $3.5 million on this commitment. It's paid in full. We could probably use it for technology or something else, but that would not be ethical, that would not be fair. And I believe if you ask Danny, it was the only time in his career that anybody ever gave money back to him. But Mr. Gatton was always interested. Danny alluded to the fact that he wanted to make UK greater. One day he called me and he said, how can we make the University of Kentucky the Vanderbilt of the publics in the SEC? And this was about 3 years ago. And for the last 3 years, we spent a lot of time together talking about concepts, ideas, things that would make a difference. Foremost in his mind was the area of scholarships. He wanted to support young people. And he was also very interested in agriculture. And you say, well, why? Most people don't know this. His older brother, Charles, who was 18 years older, graduated in 1938 from the University of Kentucky with a degree in ag. His second brother, Harry Jr., came to UK at the start of World War II, stayed 2 years, and because they needed labor back on the farm, did not complete his college education and went back to his Western Kentucky roots. Mr. Gatton was 18 years younger. And so anyway, Mr. Gatton started out at UK 2 years in the College of Agriculture. And he was going to go back to the farm. But Mr. Gatton realized that his older brother was the boss, his second brother was another boss, and he wasn't going to be the low man on anybody's totem pole, I will tell you that. And so he switched to business, the right thing to do, worked with V.V. Cook down here next to Calvary Church on High Street, sold cars, the bug hit him. And then fast forwarding, you mentioned his dad. His dad gave him his first $25,000 loan to open up a Volkswagen business in Orangeburg, Kentucky, Terry. And the goal was, in Mr. Harry Sr.'s mind was, well, he'll go broke in 2 years and he'll be back on the farm where he belongs. Mr. Gatton never went broke, and so forth, and he was very, very successful there. And because of the Chevrolet dealership opening up in '67, he moved to that particular area. But back to his philanthropy. Last fall he called. Danny was involved with this, and he made a very, very significant gift in excess of $5 million for students. Students who were excelling academically, but students who also had unmet financial need. And he wanted to reduce the burden of a college education. And because of his generosity, this past semester and again this coming semester, 607 students, averaging almost $6,000 in scholarship support in 112 counties of this state out of 120 will receive support. I had the opportunity to go see Mr. Gatton, and maybe I was the last person to see him before he went into the hospital in March, first time I'd seen him in a year. And I sat directly across from him, like where those flowers were, on an ottoman, and I said, Mr. Gatton, here's what we've done with your investment. Here's what we said we would do. Are you satisfied? And he said, I am more than satisfied. And I said, it's probably your greatest gift is to invest in those young people. He said, I would agree with you, and others have as well. After Mr. Gatton's passing, we had the service on the 23rd of April. On the 26th, downstairs in this building in Kincaid Hall, I had the opportunity, Luther, to meet those first student recipients. And I told the story of Bill Gatton, his story, his legacy in Muhlenberg County, and what's brought him here. And afterward, a student from Pikeville, an adult student, came up to me, and she said, I'm a social work student, and I received the scholarship. I thought I was too old maybe to come to this event, but I came. And said, I'm so glad that I did. And she said, I was inspired by the fact that Mr. Gatton was a bridge builder and what he's done in the lives of others. And I want you to know that I'm going to go back to Pikeville, Kentucky, and in that community, and I'm going to make an impact. I'm going to be a bridge builder for that particular community. I've never forgotten that. As I was leaving Mr. Gatton's room in March, Danny and I have talked about this. I went out into the hallway. Danny lingered for a business matter, maybe to sign a check, not sure, wasn't to us. But I was standing there, and as Danny was coming to join me, Mr. Gatton said, "Danny, be sure and tell Mike, thank you for coming to see me." And those words I've never forgotten. So my last words in closing are to publicly, sincerely, and from the depths of my heart, to say thank you, Mr. Gatton. Thank you for being the bridge builder for your family with Lee, with Chase, for your university that you loved, and for your state of Kentucky. You will forever live in our hearts.
Thank you, Mike, for those memories and moments and powerful stories that remind us of our legacy. Dr. Britt Brockman served for many years on the UK Board of Trustees as chair, some of that time, with Mr. Gatton. He respected him deeply, and they became friends. On behalf of the UK Board, I would like to invite Britt to come forward and share a special citation.
Thanks, Mr. President. It's an honor to be in this facility that in so many ways Mr. Gatton built. But this morning my mind has wandered back, as it often does, to a little more than a decade ago. Then, as a board, we were selecting a president to lead this university. Our candidate, Eli Capilouto, invited a group of us to go to Alabama. He wanted to show us how critical building and infrastructure were in supporting students, faculty, and staff. Talent and infrastructure, after all, are how you grow and sustain a university. They are how you build a future. During a tour of the University of Alabama, we saw it firsthand, gleaming new residence halls and buildings, a campus teeming with growth, and our minds started to buzz with ideas and anticipation of what we could do for our university, for our students, for our Commonwealth. Mr. Gatton saw the possibilities and potential immediately, and as usual, his mind started racing far ahead of us in terms of what we could, along with our president, envision for our university and Kentucky's university. We all know the results, of course. But we started that morning at a small airport in Bristol, Tennessee. Mr. Gatton greeted us and everyone at the tiny airport working in the front desk and throughout the facility greeted Mr. Gatton always in the same way by calling him Wild Bill. It was, of course, the moniker that people had come to know him by from years of business and auto sales, and it had made him famous throughout the region. But it also was a testament, as you've heard today, to the fact that everyone in town knew him, respected him, and felt comfortable that he was part of their community. He was one of them. I think it says so much about Bill Gatton, the Bill Gatton that I came to know over several years of service together on this board. Bill Gatton was, in so many ways, larger than life. His business interests and successes extended and expanded over industries in several states and communities, from cars and banks to real estate and development. And as we all know, he used his business acumen and success for a life of giving and service, deeply supporting causes he cared about so much, none more than this place and this institution that he believed was so vital. UK helped shape him. And he believed it was critical that UK be able to help shape the lives of generations to come, in part because of his efforts across so many decades. It is able. But the Bill Gatton I know, and the Bill Gatton that will always be part of me, was the man who called me every month or so while we served together to talk over issues, to quietly, although firmly, I might add, offer me counsel, to extend support. In the honor of helping lead our board for several years, I continually learned leadership lessons from Bill Gatton. I learned lessons about humility. I learned the importance of honoring our promises. and I saw firsthand the joy in giving and connecting to causes and concerns larger than life and self. Bill Gatton had forgotten more about business and finance than most on our board would ever know, including me. But he never acted as if we knew less or as if his contributions to the conversations mattered more. He always made his points. He always let us know how he felt on a particular issue, but we welcomed the dialogue and we encouraged it. And when a decision was made by the board and by this president who he believed in so deeply, he supported it. He stood by us, and with this place, he revered so much. Once Mr. Gatton became invested in the vision of growth that has propelled this place for the last decade, he became deeply committed to it. His support for and commitment to that vision is reflected in buildings and programs across the campus. It also lives in contributions to people, and as you've heard, particularly students. He understood the impact of education and the importance of this place because of what it had meant to him. Almost all of those who will benefit from his generosity will never know Bill Gatton, but they will understand the impact of his gift, and many of them, in turn, will make gifts and contributions themselves. We know, and I think Mr. Gatton knew, that we live on through the legacy we create. Mr. Gatton's legacy is one of giving. That impact will last for generations. It will go beyond dollars and buildings, words, or pronouncements. It will be felt in the lives of students and families, Kentuckians, who will create a cycle of virtue and hope for the state we serve on behalf of an institution that Mr. Gatton believed was essential to the future. I am honored to have known him and call him friend. I am humbled that we all, in some small way, are afforded the opportunity to learn from his example. We have been given the responsibility of following in his footsteps. What a legacy to leave us. What a chance for all of us to carry it forward. It is also my honor now to read a resolution adopted by the Board of Trustees at its April meeting in honor of Mr. Gatton. And I quote, "A resolution honoring and commending Carol Martin Bill Gatton for his service to the UK Board of Trustees, the university, his community, and the Commonwealth. Whereas Mr. Carol Martin Bill Gatton, member of the UK Board of Trustees since 2009, has left an indelible mark on the University of Kentucky and the Commonwealth of Kentucky through his generosity, service, and vision. Whereas Mr. Gatton is the single largest donor to the institution in the history of the University of Kentucky, supporting, among other initiatives, the Gatton Student Center, the Gatton College of Business and Economics, and significant investments in the UK Leads program, and an initiative focused on students with unmet financial need. Whereas Mr. Gatton's total philanthropic impact on the institution amounts to more than $70 million. Whereas Mr. Gatton's generosity was often anonymous, supporting various University of Kentucky students who never knew the true identity of their benefactor. Whereas Mr. Gatton's commitment to building a better future extended beyond the borders of the UK campus, including initiating the founding donation for the creation of the Carol Martin Gatton Academy of Mathematics and Science at Western Kentucky University, serving as the lead donor for the Bill Gatton College of Pharmacy at East Tennessee State University, establishing scholarships supporting dozens of students throughout Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia, and assisting thousands of public school teachers in the region by helping purchase supplies for their students. Whereas Mr. Gatton, during his first term of service to the UK Board of Trustees, served as chair for the Investment Committee and member of the University Athletics, Finance and Nominating Committees, and the Audit and Compliance Subcommittee. Whereas in 2015, Mr. Gatton was appointed as a lifelong honorary member of the UK Board of Trustees. Whereas Mr. Gatton ignited his entrepreneurial spirit at a young age and continued fostering it throughout his career, resulting in several ventures across the country, including building an enormously successful automotive sales enterprise throughout Kentucky, Alabama, Tennessee, and Texas, founding area bank shares of Owensboro, which was the largest bank holding company in the Commonwealth when it was purchased by BB&T in 2002, whereas Mr. Gatton was a U.S. Army veteran demonstrating his commitment to serving his fellow citizens, whereas Mr. Gatton was an alumnus of both the University of Kentucky and the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania, illustrating his passion and deep belief in the power of education, whereas Mr. Gatton is survived by his wife Lee and daughter Chase, whereas Mr. Gatton understood that numbers and donations, gifts and buildings could not be the measure of a life, but rather that a commitment of caring deeply for others was a legacy worth leaving, whereas Mr. Gatton's memory will live on forever through the lives touched and generations transformed by this remarkable man. Be it therefore resolved that the University of Kentucky Board of Trustees does hereby adopt this resolution on April 29th, 2022, and expresses on behalf of the university community our individual and collective gratitude to Mr. Bill Gatton for his exemplary support and service, and orders that this resolution be made part of the minutes of the meeting. And it's my honor, Lee, to present to you the resolution. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Brett. You make me miss him more, but you remind me how we have to honor his legacy. We would like to share with you a final video, reflection from a number of people who represent the range of people so impacted by Mr. Gatton.
Well, we should have monuments set up for him because what he's done for this university, and not this university, throughout this state. I don't know how you measure what he's done. And the resources he's given and the time he's given, it's just very hard to determine. When I first met him, he was involved in UK, and he and I just developed a good relationship. He bought some stock in our bank, and from that time on, we became real good friends because he wanted to make sure the bank was performing well. And he gave me always good advice. Whether I asked for it or not, he'd give me his opinion. And he taught me anything is possible. Stay the course, do what you need to do, and be sure you do it with class.
In 2014, my family passed away in a fire. It was my mother and 8 siblings, and me and my dad were immediately life-flighted to Vanderbilt, and we lost the house along with my whole family. It completely destroyed our lives entirely. We still feel it to this day. When I lost my family, I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know how to fit in. I didn't know how to talk with my peers. I'd lost my family, and I didn't know how to comfort myself with anyone else. I didn't have my supporters anymore. And when I came to UK, I slowly started to rebuild that, and it's because of Mr. Gatton that I've been able to rebuild a family and a community of people to rely on and to trust and to give back to. I think that Mr. Gatton's impact and the scholarship he gave will completely change my life. I mean, it's allowing me to graduate from UK with a double degree, and it's allowing me a completely different future and a career that I would have never been able to achieve without his assistance. It's given me the opportunity to engage in people I never would have been able to engage in, and meet and help as many people as I can now.
Mr. Gatton was a bridge builder. That was his favorite poem. You know, in that poem it describes an old man who trying to get across a chasm and builds this bridge across the chasm, knowing that he's at the end of his journey, and is never going to use this bridge again. And so a younger person on this path comes along and asks him, well, why are you building this bridge? And he says, well, I'm building it for you. And that is what he has done at the University of Kentucky. This building that we're in today, the Gatton Student Center, and then when you think about the Commonwealth more broadly, Gatton Academy, you think about the support for students in financial need, those things are going to change the lives of so many students in a great way, and it will just perpetuate itself generation after generation.
I would want to tell people that the impact is having a deep-seated love of something more than yourself. Mr. Gatton could have lived in a palace, he could have owned yachts, he could have traveled in high circles, he could have thrown his money around to feed his ego for grand materialistic things. That wasn't Mr. Gatton. You know, money can change people. It didn't change Mr. Gatton. It just drove him to try and do good things. He would much rather have made a donation to this university knowing that it would be put to good use and that it could change somebody's life. And that's really what he was about. That's who he was. That's how he wanted to live his life. That's how he would want to be remembered.
I love the way Mr. Gatton told a story. He could take you many places in his stories, but usually he would end up in Muhlenberg County in his story. And he would talk about the family farm and his mom and dad and siblings and the adventures of life in Muhlenberg County growing up. And you just knew that those adventures helped shape Mr. Gatton into the absolute wonderful, generous, selfless businessman that he was. Well, I think what he has done for the university will go on for a long time, for generations. And I hope that the next generation and the next generation know about Bill Gatton and learn about Bill Gatton for many reasons, for his philanthropic ways and for his generosity just to UK and for that of helping others. His absolute love for the University of Kentucky, the importance he placed on education, and his desire to help others are scattered all around us. His good deeds are so apparent, touching lives and making a difference. This is his legacy.
So Dr. Everett McCorvey, you all know, is director and executive producer of UK Opera Theatre. He's going to help us close out this special service. As I call Dr. McCorvey forward, I will tell you, Everett, that frequently, I think when I served on the NCAA Board of Governors, Mr. Gatton would call me and say, well, you know Everett needs to sing the national anthem at the Final Four, don't you? And expected me to do it. But so that's a goal that we're going to have to live up to one day, Everett. But please come forward. Thank you.
The sun shines bright on my old Kentucky home. 'Tis summer, the people are gay. The corn tops ripe and the meadows in the bloom, while the birds make music all the day. The young folks roll on the little cabin floor, all merry, all happy and bright. By and by hard times comes a-knocking at the door, then my old Kentucky home, good night. Weep no more, my lady, oh, weep no more today. We will sing one song for my old Kentucky home, for my old Kentucky home, far